Philadelphia, San Jose, DC, Los Angeles Galaxy.
Pitch Pass.
Colorado Rapids, Vancouver Whitecaps, Seattle Sounders, Montreal Impact, USA, New York Red Bulls.
Pitch Pass, your all-access credential to the people that matter in MLS. Here's your host, Greg Roche.
Welcome to the latest Pitch Pass. How are you? Thank you for downloading it. We appreciate it. Philadelphia Union fans, I know that you're coming to the table thanks to our first guest, but let me remind you also, Sebastian Salazar, who covers Houston Dynamo for Comcast Sportsnet, is also on the show, and he will join us later. But first, a guy that I'm really excited to talk about. He seems like just one of the nicest, funniest guys, at least as far as MLS players are concerned, on Twitter, and I'm glad we finally get to talk to him now. He is midfielder / defender Amobi Okugo, and he joins Pitch Pass right now. Amobi, how are you, my friend?
Good. How's everything going? Thank you for having me.
Oh, great. Thank you for taking the time. Although, I'm not sure how much soccer talk we're going to get to because I follow you on Twitter. You're one of the very good follows, and I actually have a lot of follow-up questions about things that you tweet about. Can I hit you with some questions and follow-ups for you?
Yeah, that's not a problem. Some people say I tweet too much, though. I'm glad you're one of them.
Wait, who says that?
Just a couple of guys on the team, like Jack and stuff like that.
Okay, because Jack never tweets. That's probably why he says you tweet too much.
Yeah.
You tweet.
Yeah, Jack's one of those shy guys, so.
You're tweeting enough for both of you guys. I like that, though. Balances it out.
Thank you.
So what did we find out as far as best sports movie? What did we all come to an agreement and consensus on? Because I saw you having a back and forth with Shin Guardian over this.
Oh, yeah. Remember the Titans is in a league of its own, so it's before number one. So it goes Remember the Titans, of course. And then, in my opinion, I have Ali and then Friday Night Lights for 2 and 3. But apparently Shin Guardian has never seen Ali, so he still has to wait to see that one.
And it's weird because after you threw that out there, I was like, oh, I wonder what some of the best sports movies of all time, like as voted on, are. And do you know what the number one was? I think it's one that everybody knows. I've never seen it though. Is Raging Bull. Oh,
I've never seen that. Maybe I need to go see that and make a whole new list.
But your Remember the Titans was in the top 10. Here's the one that threw me, though. And you mentioned Will Smith movies in Ali. You know what the higher-rated Will Smith sports movie is?
Which one?
The Bagger Vance golf movie.
Oh, are you serious?
That's higher than Ali.
Oh, wow.
Can you believe that?
Yeah, it might be because people didn't like Ali when he was a boxer because of how cocky he was, but I don't know.
Have you ever seen The Legend of Bagger Vance?
Yes, I saw. I've only seen it once. It's not a movie that I've seen twice.
And to me, that's a sports movie. Is one where it's whenever it's on, no matter what part, you're jumping in and you're watching to the end. And I never feel that with Bagger Vance. Ever.
It's crazy.
So the follow-up to the sports movie is, because I know you mentioned Friday Night Lights. Have you ever seen the TV show?
Oh my gosh, yeah. One of my best friends, Kopi, put me on it, and I seriously didn't get anything done for like a good 2 weeks. I would just come home from practice and watch.
How long ago did you watch it though? Because it sounds like you just got into it not too long ago.
Yeah, I was a late bloomer when it came to that. I watched it last off season, so December.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's easy because it's Netflix stream, so you just pop them in and away you go. And next thing you know, it's 2:30 in the morning and you got nothing done.
Exactly, you're exactly right. You're always wondering if you can get another extra episode in, and just trying to balance the time, and you just always pick another episode until you eventually fall asleep.
It's 3 a.m. You know what? I could probably knock out one more. I mean, there's no commercial, so it's only 40 minutes and not an hour. So I'm not going to be up till 4. That's fine.
Exactly.
And what did the last question about your Twitter stuff is? What did your fans or your followers choose for you on your new show that you're going to watch? Is it Suits or The Americans?
The majority said Suits. I think primarily because the next season for Suits is coming out in July, so they advised me that just to watch it before the next season comes.
Have you seen any USA shows? Because I feel like they're in a little league of their own.
Yeah, Law and Order SEU is one of my all-time favorite shows, if that counts. I know they show it on USA.
Yeah, they show it on USA. I would throw out my recommendation for The Americans. Very, very, very good show.
Yeah, I'm really big on like Spy and all that type of stuff. So I watched Homeland.
Yeah.
And I know it's not really. They're kind of similar, so I think I'll be really excited to watch that.
All right, so you knock out your Suits, and then the Americans by that point should be available, so you can watch that. How often do you get to watch? Because I assume like when you're on the road, that's kind of what you do. Is you kind of as you're preparing or getting relaxed for matches, that's what you do. Is just kind of unwind and you watch stuff, I guess, on your computer or your tablet.
Yeah, exactly. You know, on road trips, we usually have time to relax, so we usually just put our feet up, rest. And I'm either doing homework or watching Netflix or just meeting up with, friends on the other team.
Wait.
So
you mentioned
I got the Netflix account, just pop in the shows that I'm watching, and it's game from there.
You mentioned homework. Are you doing the online thing?
Oh, yes. I'm doing it online through Philadelphia Community College, just a local school out here. And it's good. It helps me pass the time. And I don't know, I left UCLA early, and with the whole Generation Adidas thing, I'm able to take classes and get reimbursed. So it's good. I promised my mom that I would do it if she let me go pro. So it's been working out. That's
a big accomplishment. And I think that's one of those things where it says a lot about you, where you could easily just go, well, whatever. I can do that at some other point. But you're actually taking the time in season to take these online classes and to do some schoolwork.
Oh yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, we have so much downtime. Everyone thinks that our lives are so busy, but we have a lot of downtime, so it's good, just kill two birds with one stone and take advantage of the opportunity that MLS gave to me. So
this will be you might as well take it up. If they're going to pay for it, you might as well let them do it.
Exactly.
So the news of today, as far as your team is concerned, is the Gabriel Farfan deal. I know that you took it hard. You've already tweeted out the good lucks and all. This is a weird situation because it's not like something where you lose a teammate and gain a teammate. It's like we just lost somebody, and now it's kind of like, all right, we got to wait till next year to see what we get for it. What are your initial thoughts on that deal for your team?
Yeah, it's always hard losing a player, especially a player that meant so much to your team. He was a great guy on the field and off the field. He's one of the funnier guys that brought the teammates together. It's tough because he was always playing out of position, and he was fighting for the midfield spot this season, but it didn't really work out his way. So I'm happy he's going to have the opportunity to finally show what he has in the midfield, because I know he's itching to play midfield again, and I'm just happy for him that he's going to get an opportunity to be close to home and play where he wants to play.
No blossoming in July, though, is what you.
Oh, exactly. No.
All right. So I know that a lot of people have asked you your D mid versus center back. The thing that people go back and forth with you on. I'm going to ask you in a different way, because it seems to me in everything that I've heard you say in blogs and in interviews is that you definitely prefer playing center mid, but you enjoy learning about playing center back, and you want to play center back, and you're happy to be there. So my question is, why is center mid to you more fun to play than center back?
Just like, cause, you can make late runs. You feel more involved, like in terms of getting more touches. Sometimes, growing up playing club, center backs were always the ones that just kick it up and defend, and it was kind of boring. But center back, the way most recently I've been playing it, it's much more to that, and it's growing on me. But center mid is my natural position where I've always played growing up with the youth national teams, even Olympic team and stuff like that, and it's just exciting to play center mid. I grew up watching Makalele and SCN and even Desai, who actually plays a little bit of center back too. So it's kind of fun. So just watching those guys and playing that position, it's always fun for me to play center mid. But center back is starting to grow on me, and just dealing with forwards, runs, and taking pride in stopping a top forward. It gets fun and it grows on you.
Yeah, it's just, I was interested because, the midfield destroyer role, and the guys that you mentioned are all known as midfield destroyers. I was wondering where the fun is in that, and breaking up attacks, but I guess also being able to get up into the attack when necessary is something that is appealing.
Yeah, exactly.
My
I
favorite.
can't
Go ahead.
do that at center back. Coach Hack would kill me.
He's not letting you push forward, bringing the ball out of the back.
yeah, just pass it to the creative guys and let them do the magic.
You know your soccer history. Again, judging by your Twitter feed, judging by the players that you just threw out there, none of those guys are considered the glamour guys, so to speak. I feel a kinship to that because my favorite player, well, the first favorite player that I kind of latched onto was Frank Rijkaard, who was like a predecessor of Desai as well, where it's a midfield guy who breaks up attacks, but then as he got later in his career, moved back to center back.
Yeah, he's a great player. I remember him from AC Milan days. I mean, I was too young to even know about him, but my dad would always tell stories about him, because I played his position and stuff like that. So I try to go on YouTube and watch his old videos. And it's just, I remember reading something like from Zidane talking about the most important player on their team when he was back at Real Madrid, and he said it was Makelele because he allowed all the other players like Figo, Raul, Zidane to, freelance. And then I read another thing about Mourinho talking about the team revolves around Makelele, and you don't get credit, with goal scoring or all the commercials or accolades and stuff, but just the fact that your teammates and the real soccer pundits and soccer fans know how valuable you are to a team. That's what I really liked about the midfield destroyer role. And recently, with these new center mids that are kind of hybrids like myself that can play center back, like De Rossi, who did it in Euros, Javi Martinez, who does it for Bayern Munich sometimes, it's growing on me a lot, especially after talking with Coach Hack. He brought up Desai, just like he brought up Frank Rijkaard, that guys that played center mid and moved back and are able to be a hybrid. It just helps my confidence to continue to play center back and hopefully get better in the position.
Your coach knows you. He threw out the right names to sell you on moving back to center back.
Yeah, he knew I loved Chelsea, and that's why he's a Chelsea legend. So once he said that, I was kind of like, okay, we'll think about it. We'll see about it.
Well, you're very tuned in to the world, as far as the game is concerned, and also the history. You mentioned how your father would always talk about that. Do you think about playing center back versus playing midfield destroyer or D mid or center mid as it pertains to your national team options? Because you look at the national team now and you're like, oh, there is a number of guys who play that position. But as far as center back's concerned, it's kind of a revolving door. And do you think about that as something of, oh, okay, this is another reason why this may be a good move for me, because this might be a little bit more of a fast track to get on the national team?
Yeah, you bring up a great point. Once you get the first camp, first call-up, you don't really care what position it may be in. One coach may like you as a center back, and one coach may like you as a center mid. But if you're playing on your national team, it doesn't really matter how you're playing. Jeff Cameron, who was a great center mid in the league, ended up playing center back for a year, and now he's like playing right back for the national team, and I'm sure he's not complaining. So wherever it may be to help and get seen to help your national team is a great honor, and you just got to take advantage of the opportunity that you may get.
Well, let me ask you about your dad. You brought up how he watched teams throughout the world when you were born, when you were growing up. How was he able to do that? Because I remember in the 90s, mid to late 90s, and so I assume late 90s you kind of have an awareness of what was going on. It was hard. It wasn't a YouTube where you could just go to.
I remember we would always go to my uncle's house. He somehow got all the games out of one of those illegal whatever. And then my dad would VHS all the games, and we just watch them on the weekends after basketball or soccer tournaments and stuff.
So you just watch tapes of games that happened 3, 4, 5 days ago.
Exactly.
But it was awesome, and it was grainy because of the VHS tape.
Exactly. You can go back. I think if I go back home to Sacramento, my dad still has games that you wouldn't even think of that were around or could find.
And I don't know if you were like me or your family was like me. There were certain points of the game where you knew something was happening that you really liked, so you would pause it and rewind it. And then after you doing that a few million times, it would just kind of gloss over that part.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, every time my dad watches '96 Olympic Nigeria versus Brazil, he knows the exact minute Kanu scores, so he rewinds it. My mom gets so mad. Like, we already know what happened. They won. Like, let it go.
Well, it's been great talking to you about the sports movies and about everything else, Amobi. Thank you very much for taking the time. We appreciate you checking in the Pitch Pass.
No problem. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure talking to you and meeting you and everything.
How great a guy is he, huh? Amobi Okugo for Philadelphia Union. And make sure you follow him on Twitter. He's a great, great follow. And it's awesome because you could see the personality that you are reading in Twitter. And it's great to see when a guy like that kind of translates it into his regular personality. Some people on Twitter are a little bit different than they are in real life. So follow him. He's a really good guy. Hopefully now new friend of the show, at Amobi, Maobi says, is his Twitter handle. At Sebi Salazar CSN is our next guest's Twitter handle. Started off in my backyard in Washington, D.C., and did some work for D.C. United. Now has moved on, and he's like big time. He works for Comcast Sportsnet Houston, covering the Houston Dynamo, the U.S. national team, and Mexican national team, if you ask him. Sebastian Salazar, my good friend Sebastian Salazar, joins us on Pitch Pass right now. Sebi, what's going on, man?
Not much, man. Just enjoying being on the other side of this thing. The prodigal son returns, man. I'm pumped to be doing this again with you, man.
This is weird. And the people... Sebi,
is it like ex-girlfriend weird, or is it...
I think it might be ex-girlfriend weird. Because, well, I'm hanging out with my new girl, but the girl that I kind of still have a crush on is now, it just walked up out of nowhere. And so now it's like, oh, now it's like a weird situation.
Yeah, I think most of the women in my life will tell you I'm best left as the one that got away. So.
Now, I want to fill people in because, Sebi, this isn't the Capital Soccer Show. This is my
No, it's not.
This is my national podcast, Pitch Pass.
Hey, man, give yourself some credit, dude. I love the show. I listen every week, and I get a kick out of it. So
well,
I think you're doing something great.
Thank you. If for people who may not know, but Sebastian and I hosted a show last season that was strictly DC United focused on Capital Soccer Show, and we did it in conjunction with the club. So that's where Sebi and I have done a lot of hosting and co-hosting with each other. And now this is your first appearance on this thing, which is Pitch Pass, which is MLS stuff, which is perfect because you have a few teams that you can touch on right now with your expertise.
I can, man. We've been, I tell you what, with our coverage here in Houston, we've been kind of all over the place. I obviously still keep very close tabs on DC United. I got to see them play, although play might be a generous term, about a week ago. And obviously with the Dynamo, we're out there, 2-3 times a week. I was just out there today. So yeah, it's fun to kind of branch out in terms of my understanding and knowledge of MLS, but I certainly still do keep tabs on what goes on up there in the nation's capital.
We'll get to DC United last. Let's just save that for last.
Save the best for last, right?
Well, sure. So I will say to you that it is funny to read some of the stuff on Twitter where the speculation amongst United fans is United, as soon as the Capital Soccer Show went away, United kind of went off the rails. Coincidence? Which is very, very funny. So thank you for that. And I will say also, Sebi, I'm glad that we did the show last year and not this year.
Oh, my gosh. Can you imagine? I mean, we had some tense moments with Ben as it was.
Yes.
Can you imagine this year and talking to those guys? Yeah, people ask me that all the time. Do I miss DC? Of course, I miss DC. It's home. I miss DC United. But, that job that we did with the Capital Soccer Show, which was a lot of fun last year, and then my job specifically with the club being there every day as kind of a inside media member, boy, that would have been – I don't know that I know the right word, how difficult and unpleasant it would have been so far this season.
And we'll touch on that in a couple of minutes, as I said. The first thing I want to get into with you, though, is we just put up your latest, I don't know if you call it a column, but your latest post on pitchpass.com.
Column implies that I'm a writer, which is
well. I was actually saying column would imply you do it consistently, which is definitely not. What? I'm just saying.
Was that a shot across the bow?
So every once in a while, Sebi will post some of his musings on pitchpass.com. And this one, he had a chance to talk to the Honduran national team coach and the Mexican national team coach. I don't want to get too much into that because I want people to go to pitchpass.com and give us the page views and read it. But there is one thing I wanted to touch on, which I threw out on Twitter today, and that is the thing, and I don't know who said this, and I hope that you can confirm this, was that the top players in the Mexican League make about $2 million a year. Where did you hear that at?
So here's kind of how it went down. Obviously, the Honduran coach, Luis Fernando Suarez, was here. He was here specifically as part of a tour to talk with managers of his players to kind of figure out the rest of the schedule for the year with Gold Cup and all that and qualifying. And then Chepo de la Torre and Héctor González Iñárritu, who's the head of selections of national teams in Mexico, were both here promoting the friendly against Nigeria at the end of the month. And so we had some interviews with those guys, and then we also had a kind of private luncheon, some of the media here, with those two gentlemen. And we had discussions about kind of salary structure, and one of the things that I was really interested in was, where do the leagues rank? And obviously, as I kind of noted at the end of the article, Iñárritu, who was the guy that I was sitting next to, was like, yeah, it's Brazil now 1, Mexico 2, United States 3.
And that's as far as highest salaries in the Americas.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Highest paying leagues in the Americas. And then I said, well, what's the best deal in Mexico? And he said between $2 and $2.5 million per year, which is obviously much less than a Thierry Henry makes now, or even a Landon Donovan. But I actually looked it up. I Googled it, and a Forbes magazine article did a similar, did actually broke out all the salaries, and I think the highest was Humberto Suazo, and he was $3 million. Somebody else, Cristian Benitez for America was 2.7, and then there was a bunch of guys clustered at around 2.2, 2 million. Lucas Lobos, somebody else that's escaping me, and then everybody else kind of below that.
So he wasn't far off then.
A few guys over that. But no. He was, and that was just a guess. But he would know. I mean, he was the president of Tigres. He was the president of Club America before Iñárritu, before he took over the head of national teams for Mexico.
So when I threw that out there, a couple of people got back to me and was like, that's a little crazy. And that's why I actually threw it out there, because to me that seems like wait a second. There are people in MLS making more than that, and the two people you pointed out. So do you think the difference is once you get to the minimums, that's where the disparity between the Mexican League and MLS comes in?
Sure, and you can't. I mean, there's a difference between your average and your mean, right?
Yeah.
If we're using mathematical terms, and so I think, I think your average player in Mexico, and again, I don't know this, but I think makes quite a bit more than the 89, 90 that is the kind of mean in MLS. Your average in MLS is, I think, significantly more than that, but I think it's because of the Henrys, the Donovans, the Keens who drag everybody up. But as you and I know, I mean, we all have seen the salaries. There's so many guys in MLS that are making $44,000 a year.
Yeah.
And so that really brings your average down. I think the kind of the average starter on a top 5-6 club in Mexico is just making at least, probably double that similar position in MLS, and that's the difference.
But what I took solace in, and I know there's two ways you can look at it, and the average is the way where you go. There's a long way to go to get to the average. But what I took solace in is the gap in as far as money is concerned isn't huge. It's not like European salary huge, which I don't know. Maybe I put the Mexican League as one step down as far as salaries are concerned from the big European clubs, and that's not the case, which means that the gap isn't as big financially as I thought it was.
Well, the gap isn't as big, but then you also hear in other terms that when the Sounders are going up against Tigres or Monterrey in CONCACAF Champions League, that the salary, the bill, the wage list for Monterrey will be between 10 and 12 million, and for a Sounders it's between 3 and 5. So if you look at it that way, from the team's total investment in players, there seems to be quite a large gap. I think when you talk about competition, you have to acknowledge that the gap is shrinking. And actually, Chepo said that to me. He's like, "Yeah, listen, like it's whatever gap there is competitively is minimal now at best." And he really pointed out the last 12, 18 months. He said it's shrunk even more. So I think soccer is such an even sport. But when you have a huge financial advantage, and I think there still is one there, and look at a guy like Herculez Gomez. I mean, a perfect example in financially of the benefit of playing in Mexico. If you can hang, if you can make it, and you can find work there, you are going to do significantly better for yourself in that market than you would in the U.S.
Pitchpass.com for the full column from Sebi with more quotes from both the Mexican and the Honduran national team coach as their thoughts and their feelings on how they perceive MLS. So let's talk about MLS and let's talk about the team that you cover every day, and that's Houston Dynamo. Had a nice run going, and then to me, no shame in losing to Sporting Kansas City, but it did end the longest home streak in their history. Was it league history or was it their history?
Yeah, it was league history. 36 straight home unbeaten. Hadn't lost since June 18th, 2011 in Houston. It dates back, pre-BBVA Compass Stadium back to Robertson Stadium on the U of H campus. So, yeah, listen, it was a spectacular streak. I think in some ways maybe the end of the streak is a relief. I know they didn't talk about it internally, but it was starting to become a major talking point in the media. When a guy like me goes out there and talks about the streak, that's one thing. I think I kind of still fit into the soccer nerd media type. But when, the local media, the guys from your Fox local affiliate and your NBC local affiliate, when those guys are showing up at practice and talking about the streak, even when a coach as level-headed as Dominic Kinnear and a team as experienced and veteran as this group kind of brushes it aside, and I really believe them when they said they didn't talk about it in the locker room, it's still, in some ways, kind of it builds pressure. And, if you look at the situation, if it was going to come to an end, it was this game. You talk about quality of opponent, end of a just awful week of travel, a great week for the club. Hey, they go to L.A., go to D.C., and pick up 6 points. But, you're talking about going 2 time zones to the west, 3 back to the east, and 2 back to Houston. And they were pretty beat up, pretty tired. So was Sporting Kansas City. They played an equally kind of difficult stretch of games. And the game itself, Roche, I don't know how much of it you saw, but it was, for as many good players as there were on the field, it was pretty ugly. It was pretty physical, and it was a lot of kind of – you got the sense that exactly the type of goal that was going to score was going to be the only goal scored and was going to be the type that broke that game open. Yeah,
and judging by the tweets from the players and even Chris Canetti himself, it did seem like it was one of those things where the end of the streak was a chance for them to exhale and go, okay, now we can actually focus on getting the results that we want, that we need, and not have this thing looming over our head every time we turn around.
And truth be told, the disappointment was not in the end of the streak, as I understood it in talking to the guys and even talking to some of the guys today at practice. The disappointment, the anger, was in losing to Sporting Kansas City.
Yeah.
I mean, these two teams, you kind of live in the Northeast your whole life, you say, okay, Red Bulls and DC and Philly. And DC-Philly last year when that rivalry was really getting heated and it was real chippy, obviously, Portland, Seattle. But because of the quality of these two teams and the weight of the games that they've played, people ought to start looking at Houston and Sporting Kansas City as one of the better rivalries in MLS. Those games, they mean something. And Corey Ash walking off the field yesterday said, hey, this felt like a playoff game. And I don't know how many MLS regular season games feel like playoff games. Certainly not on May 12th.
And I think that win really takes it up a notch because up until that win, Dynamo kind of took every match they needed to take from Sporting, especially ending their season at Sporting Park. So this kind of levels the playing field and go, okay, you know what? You're not just going to do bad things to us. We now took your streak away from you.
And you know what? We were doing a promo shoot with Tally Hall today, and he's like, I'm real pissed. I'm angry about it. He was, pretty upset about the game still, but he's like, I think that the fact that they were the ones that broke the streak, and these were his words, makes the rivalry even more relevant to the whole league. And I couldn't agree with him more.
So is it secondary rival to FC Dallas, or do you think that this has surpassed that rivalry?
It's totally surpassed it. I mean, when you play a team once a year. You don't get them home and home, so your fans don't always necessarily get to see them. There's just I think there's more of a rivalry, truthfully, down here between Houston and Dallas, the cities.
Yeah.
Just in everything, you know what I mean? And so that kind of comes through. Like, people from Houston and people from Dallas are not the same, and they don't see eye to eye, and they're very different in that way. But I think from an MLS and soccer-specific standpoint, this has totally overtaken that as kind of Houston's chief rival.
I watched the match, and I heard you doing your sideline reporting. Fantastic job, Sebi. And
thank you. My 10-second snippets of fame.
Exactly. One of the things that you said and that you then followed up with a tweet is how, I don't know if you were surprised, but you mentioned Zuzi's role and how it basically seems like he has a free role to go wherever he needs to go to get the ball. What were your thoughts seeing him pitch side in that match and what his development and how he's looking these days as far as national team and as far as his form for the club?
Yeah, listen, Graham Zusi, I mean, there was a moment where I saw him basically as a right back. And I just don't know that I've ever seen a player do that before. I know I've seen guys have free reign, and we were accustomed to it with DC with Dwayne De Rosario, but it was a freedom in the top half of the field.
Yeah,
I mean, he really seems to be able to go wherever he wants, whenever he wants, and something that then I don't know if you heard this on the broadcast as well. Eddie Robinson pointed out, former Dynamo player, former MLS All-Star. He said, he's like, yes, that happens, but it only happens and is functional because basically everybody knows that around him. And so when he's floating around, the rest of the team kind of molds itself to cover the spots, fill in the holes that he's vacated. And, it didn't really show in this Sunday's game because of just kind of the nature of the game. Zusi didn't really have a lot of run of the ball. But, you can see it. He's pretty free. And that game a couple weeks ago against Chivas USA, he could have had 6 assists in that game. Like, I mean, you see a guy that kind of creates chances at will. And, I don't know that I've seen an offensive playmaking performance like he had against Chivas USA in a long time in MLS. Now, some of that's the opponent. Some of that was after they went to 10 men. But it was still pretty impressive to me. And
I don't want to get bogged down in hyperbole, but the way you're talking makes me start thinking about things in that terms because because my follow-up question is who covers the space that he then vacates, and if you're saying that it's understood that he's got the keys, Vermes is giving him the keys, and everybody else is happy to fill in the spaces that he's leaving open. I don't think we've had an American player at that age have that kind of free role other than, say, Landon Donovan. And to me, that's kind of exciting when you think about how he can translate whatever that is to how he incorporates himself into the national team setup.
Well, listen, the bottom line is you have to create chances. And I'll say, I don't know that there's anybody in MLS that creates more chances, whether it's for themselves or for other people. Now, he's given the opportunity to do it, but I don't know that you can point to one guy and say, hey, this is the guy that's covering or that's eating up a lot of that space. I mean, maybe Yuri Rosell in the middle, but, he also kind of gives something to the distribution that they have kind of out of the center of midfield. And the way that I saw Zusi, and again, this was just this game and being on the sidelines and really keep watching him because I'm intrigued by him as a player, and he's obviously a guy to watch. He does. He started on the left midfield. Within the first 10 minutes, he was at right midfield. 15, 20 minutes in is when I, kind of dropped my jaw when I saw him at right back, playing out of the back. And so you can't, it's not like he's switching left to right or going left midfield to, a withdrawn forward. And so, you got a left back that steps up into that space. There's a ton of guys that kind of have to adjust around him. And to me, that's where you got to credit, Peter Vermes for having a system and having disciplined players who have to, in some ways, sacrifice their own kind of individual freedoms to allow, their best player to do a thing. And again, you and I used to always talk about this. There are teams with identities in MLS, and there are teams that don't have identities. Sporting Kansas City definitely has an identity, and more, it's Graham Zusi.
All right, so let's talk about Dynamo. Will Bruin now in the national team setup. Brad Davis now in the national team setup. But now I'm also seeing that there are people starting to kind of think to themselves, all right, well, what about Corey Ash for Gold Cup? What about Tally Hall for Gold Cup? How close are those guys, do you think, are to the national team setup? And more Dynamo players leaving, that can't be good for the team, even though it's a nice feather in their cap.
Well, listen, first things first, Dominic Kinnear has built this team very, very deep. And I think especially in midfield, they're going to be okay. I don't know. One guy you didn't mention is Ricardo Clark, and I know that Ricardo Clark, that name sends chills down some American spines because of one play and maybe a few other performances here and there. But if people have watched the Dynamo this year, I think they're seeing a different Ricardo Clark. One, he is way more active offensively. And two, he's been their most consistent player in midfield. And I was talking to a guy, Daryl Lovell, who covers the Dynamo for MLSsoccer.com today, and he made the point, listen, can you right now name me a player that's been better for the Dynamo this season? And it's tough. It's tough. So Ricardo Clark definitely needs to be in that conversation.
Yeah, but I look at a guy like Ricardo Clark in the same situation as Bobby Boswell, where it's like, yeah, those guys could easily be national team members, especially for something like Gold Cup. But the line in front of them seems so long, and it also feels like, in talking with Bobby, he feels this way as well. Once you reach a certain age and you're not considered in the setup, the ship has kind of sailed for you for some reason.
I don't disagree with that, and I think one of the travesties of it is especially at Bobby's position at center back.
Yes.
When we are so quick to anoint a guy at center back at 22, 23 years old, when really the best, the peak, the prime for a center back, because of the mental impact, the impact that your brain has on that position, is probably closer to 28, 29, 30. But we've already given up on guys by then. Because we always want the next young thing. And listen, now you've got somebody in Omar Gonzalez who probably deserves to be the guy in that spot. But, at 27, 28, 29, are we going to say, oh, forget Omar Gonzalez, there's this other guy?
Yeah.
When really Omar Gonzalez is getting into his prime then. When you watch a guy like Bobby Boswell play, he does not cover as much ground as Jermaine Taylor, who is his partner here with the Dynamo. But he's smart. He cuts out passes. He reads the game, and that's an important part of that position. And I think you're right. Listen, with the U.S. national team, maybe Ricardo Clark's ship has sailed. I would say if you're an impartial observer and you're watching this league and you're saying, okay, who's the best player on one of the best teams, and Ricardo Clark fits that description for me, then he should be considered whether he's had a run and has a pass or doesn't. I don't think you can hold that against a guy. So, I think him and Corey Ash, to me, are in the same boat. They're guys who did obviously different paths to get here. They're guys who probably deserve a shot, may not get it. I think Tally Hall is in a very different position. I think Tally does get a call up at some point, whether it is for a World Cup qualifier or maybe for the Gold Cup. I think Tally has earned that both by being in camp and by continued performance. And the improvement that he's made in some of the areas that I think Klinsmann and staff wanted him to get better at. I think if you saw the goal that Will Bruin scored against DC United, that first goal where he drags it past Dejan Jakovic with two great touches, and then baits Bill Hamid out and chips him. That's a goal we haven't seen from Will Bruin. And if an American striker at his age is doing that, you got to give him a shot. Strikers don't grow on trees. Yeah. Certainly not red hot guys. He definitely fits that. So I think, Brad Davis, if you're in the 14 best players to play in Azteca, I mean, right now you got to think he's got an inside track at a World Cup spot. Now, there's a lot of things that can happen between now and then, but he earned some pretty big minutes down there in Mexico City.
Okay, so if you take injuries out of play, where are there any, if there are any, red flags as far as this Dynamo team is concerned? Because they seem to be, just like all Dominic Kinnear clubs have been historically, kind of rock solid in almost every line of their team.
Yeah, I mean, I think outside back is a spot where we haven't really seen their depth tested. If there's a call-up for a Corey Ash or an injury to a Kofi Sarkodie, those guys are great. And the reason that they're great is because they've both really, really strengthened their game as one-on-one defenders, and they can bomb forward. Your second kind of option out there is Mike Chabala. And I think Mike Chabala can probably get you through a stretch, but I don't know that he gives you the same in attack as a Kofi Sarkodie or a Corey Ash. He's just not as fast, and that's not really a knock on Mike, but Corey's a burner, and Kofi's not much slower. So I think between those two guys, it's not just what they do defensively at those spots, what they do attack that makes them really difficult to replace. And I think you got to look at center back. Like Jermaine Taylor comes out of the game against Sporting Kansas City at the half due to illness, and Eric Bruner replaces him. And the chemistry between Taylor and Boswell is so good. It really is truly so solid that there's just a notable difference. I don't even know that it's Bruner's play that's the drop-off, but just the communication, the understanding between him and Boswell that you really kind of note when Taylor's not on the field. And he has also missed some games with, Jamaican international duty. So that's one area where I think there could be some concern. I think the midfield's really deep. For those who've not seen Andrew Driver play, this guy he's special. He was at one point 3-4 years ago valued at like £3 million by EPL clubs, suffered through some injuries, had some issues with his coach at Hearts in Scotland. Dominic Kinnear, I don't know where he finds these guys, but he just has an unbelievable eye for talent. He did it with Boniek Garcia. He's done it again with Andrew Driver. And Driver has had no trouble getting himself, fit for the heat, the travel, all the stuff that you assume a European guy's going to struggle with. He's been awesome, man. He's really been great. And the forward line is deep, and you're hoping to get Kalen Carr and Omar Cummings back. I think Kalen's probably more, start training in maybe late summer. Maybe you get him back September. It's difficult because all those guys kind of heal differently from an ACL. He's just recently has started kind of ramping it up a notch, being seen out on the practice field and whatnot. Omar Cummings has kind of had this knee issue drag on, but you assume at some point you're going to get him back, which gives you that extra element of speed up top. Giles Barnes has been a revelation in his second season with the club. So they really are deep, man. They're deep, and a lot of that credit has to go to Kinnear for his ability to eyeball talent.
And we're stroking my boy Boswell, but even your hesitancy about that is, I look at Hainu, Cameron, and now Taylor. It just seems like he finds a way to find that whoever his partner's strength is and then play to that. So even that, which you perceive as kind of could be a concern, I don't even look at it as concern because I feel like as long as he's there and as long as Tally Hall's there, they're going to find a way to get that other center back up to speed.
Well, and Bobby mentioned this in an interview we did, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks ago. He said, listen, I've been blessed to play with some freak athletes down here and guys who really cover a lot of ground. And maybe what we see from Bobby isn't, we may perceive it as, he's not as fast as he used to be. And he probably isn't. But also some of that is he doesn't need to be. Those guys cover the ground. Kofi Sarkodie flies. Corey Ash flies. Jermaine Taylor side to side. When he gets going, he's a truck, man. So Bobby doesn't need to do it. What he needs to do is organize, keep things cool, and distribute a little bit out of the back. And for the most part this season, man, he's been really good at doing that, and he's been really good at kind of anticipating the problem spots when his outside backs do get up and snuffing it out before it develops into anything. That's what I really appreciate about Boswell's game, is his ability to 40, 50 yards from goal, identify a situation, break it up, whether it's with a professional foul, just a well-timed tackle, and it doesn't develop into a 3-on-2. It doesn't develop into a 2-on-1. Is
there any chance we see Brian Salazar this season?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, the deal is he was going to finish his high school work before he even really joined the team full time. And so his graduation from high school down here won't be until, I want to say, like the 18th of June or middle of June or something. So by the time you break in there, maybe in an Open Cup match or a friendly, there might be some time. But I'm telling you, the midfield is deep. It's really, really deep. I mean, we haven't talked about a guy like Warren Creval, who in his second year has found valuable minutes. So it's hard for me to imagine a situation, barring a massive strike by the injury bug, where Brian Salazar gets some run. And that's not an indictment on him. It's just kind of, Dom's a loyal coach. He's got plenty of depth, and it's going to take a real special situation to get Salazar into a meaningful rotation.
But for our non-Dynamo fans who may not know, this kid is a stud.
Yeah, listen, and you know what he is? He's unique. He's unique in kind of American soccer circles. He's got some flair. He really likes to run at people. A couple weeks before they signed him, in kind of everybody's whoa moment, there was a reserve match, and he was running at full professionals. I'm not going to name names, and he was beating them. And listen, he had a great first 45 minutes, and then everybody said, wait, why is this academy kid beating on us? And they shut it down. I mean, they really kind of, some of the guys took it personally, and his second half wasn't as good as his first. And it was interesting to kind of note that hey, this kid has the ability to flash, But the ability to flash is not going to get you playing time under Dominic Kinnear. You really have to be consistent. And Kinnear said this at the press conference. He said, it was hard to get here, but the hard work's just starting. Staying here is going to be the biggest challenge for this kid. And, and I believe that. They wouldn't have signed him if they didn't think that there was a spot for him and a use for him. But I think it's more way down the road than anything in 2013.
Last thing about the Dynamo, and tell me if I'm crazy. Every time I turn on a match at BBVA Compass, I see a lot of orange, and it's not because everybody is rocking the orange. Is the team, attendance-wise, engagement from the city of Houston, is it where it wants to be, or does it still feel like it needs to do a little more work?
I think outside of just a handful of markets in MLS, everybody needs to do more work, and I don't think that's different down here in Houston. We saw at the end of last year, somewhat similar to what we saw in D.C., when a team's running well and there's the end of the season and there's this kind of crush of the playoffs, selling out isn't difficult. And they had some proper sellouts at the end of last year. The last 2 playoff games down here were fully sold out. One of the last regular season games was an announced sellout, and if it wasn't sold out, it was pretty. If it wasn't every seat in the house, it was pretty close. And I would say that I've been disappointed by some of the turnouts. We've had a couple Sunday games down here, which I don't know if it helps. I would assume it hurts. I think your wheelhouse is Saturday night. So I think that's not ideal. I think MLS has thrown them a bone when it comes to summer scheduling. All the kickoffs in the summer are going to be at 8, and I believe they're going to be on Saturdays. So you're not going to have any 4 p.m.ers in the afternoon. The league said enough of that, which will hurt attendance. The Rockets made a run down here that kind of captured the city and maybe took some attention away at a critical time from the Dynamo. And I think, just the length of the MLS season, sounds like I'm making excuses, but these are kind of the things that a lot of MLS clubs battle. The length of the MLS season, I think you have a lot of general, I don't know that apathy is the right word, but people not, your diehards are engaged, but is everybody else engaged? Well, probably not until May or June when everything else is settled down. And that's the crowd that gives you a sellout, that packs a stadium. Your diehards can only do so much, no matter the size of your home.
Well, Kyle Sheldon and Mark McClure are cringing right now because I'm about to change subjects and not wrap up the show. But whatever, we've got to do our mini Capital Soccer Show reunion and talk about DC United. And as you said, you've been following. You made it out to a couple of matches so far. This feels like it's taking a lot of people by surprise. But then when you peel back that one layer of nice run from September to the end of the season, when you peel that away, you think to yourself what the team lost and what they did last year. This shouldn't be a surprise, this run of poor form from this team.
This bad, it's a surprise. I thought that the worst this team could do, I would not have guessed was 4 points from 9 games, or 4 points from 10 games now, whatever. I do think that if you look back, when Dwayne De Rosario got hurt last year, they were a borderline playoff team. And, I don't want to take away what the accomplishments of a year ago because, you can call it smoke and mirrors, and that puts kind of a negative connotation on it. Or you could say, hey, man, they were gritty, and they got some results when maybe people didn't expect them to. But those last 6-7 games were against the worst teams in MLS. I mean, you're talking about they were playing Toronto, they were playing New England, they were playing Portland. All those teams at the time were a disaster. And even if you remember those games, they were 1-0 games, 2-1 games. They weren't. DC wasn't dominating. And so I think when you look at if you look at how the team is built and you acknowledge, okay, Branko Boskovic, who's a guy who makes everybody around him better. Maybe Branko we never viewed as great, but he made your other players better by the service he got them, by the timing of his passes, the quality of his passes. His set pieces were something that I think is sorely missed. And you take away an Andy Nahar who gives you that dangerous breakdown, that 2-on-1 on the right flank, the ability to combine with a Nick DeLeon, which, by the way, made Nick DeLeon 10 times better having Andy Nahar right there with him as another threat in the overlap. That allows you to be much more dangerous. You take those two guys out, You take basically, you add a year to Dwayne De Rosario on a pretty serious injury that he has to overcome. You take Chris Pontius and Nick De Leon's health and you throw that up in the air, which it has been, and what you have is just is a lot of work and not a lot of ability to create chances. And I think up until recently, there was a glaring issue of creating chances. I think maybe in the last 3 weeks, there's been some more chances, so maybe some more hope, but there hasn't necessarily been, the goals to follow. I would go back to basically the Columbus game, which you see a 3-0 result, but you say, okay, well, they could have scored 2 or 3 on their own. And I don't know that before that you would have said that about any DC game so far this season. And to me, if you're a DC fan, my biggest worry and the thing that is the biggest surprise to me, the biggest letdown, is the center of defense. You have a huge investment by the club there in Brandon McDonald, Dejan Jakovic, and those guys I thought were really poised to become a lockdown, shut you out center back pairing that when it's combined with a Bill Hamid was going to keep you in darn near every game you played. And I think that their regression, and some of that may have to do with the pieces around them because center backs aren't an island. I think that's been the most startling and disconcerting element of this tough start for me. For me, the biggest concern is D-Row and D-Row acting now like a 35-year-old. And if D-Row is just a really, really good player on a team that is built around D-Row having to be a great player, it's not going to work because everything is built around him creating magic. And if he's not going to be able to create the magic on the basis that he has been throughout his career, it's going to be a long season for this team. You know what? And this goes back to Bronco for me. And I'm not saying that Bronco was the fix-all, and I'm not saying that you couldn't find somebody that could do that role. And I'm sure that they're looking. We know that there's been some recent scouting trips there from DC. I just here's the thing: Chris Pontius, Nick De Leon, and Dwayne De Rosario can all create moments of magic. But do you really view them as link-up players, as guys who play within a system that DC attacks through? No. I personally don't. I see them as guys who, if they all have great games and create one goal each, you win 3-0 and you walk off, maybe you dominated. But the truth is, a guy like Bronco allows you to have a system where you get those guys the ball in dangerous spots and you make them better. And right now I see a team that, with all the struggles at the back, basically has some guys who can make a play, 2 of whom are hurt, 1 of whom is recovering from a very serious injury and has crossed into that kind of potentially, I don't want to say final, but maybe final stage of his career. And you're relying on these guys to make that magic, which either through health or age seems to not be there right now. And that's the concern, is how are you going to get goals? Before you had Andy bombing up, before you had other ways of getting goals, and now it's really just magic, and that magic isn't there. And it's a great point, because the 3 guys that you mentioned all rely on taking guys on. And whereas you're saying is, well, Bronco's going to get you the ball in the position where you can take a guy on and then create your magic. But if nobody is there to get you the ball, then you're just kind of sitting around taking 2-3 guys on because you haven't seen the ball in 15 minutes. Yeah, I mean, I just and that's the thing. I mean, they're relying a lot on Perry to kind of be this attacking, to get more into the attack and to give more. But if you watch how Perry Kitchen plays right now, his biggest responsibility has to be protecting that back 4. And so when you ask him to get up more and more, you're really asking him to expose himself and expose, the back 4 in kind of these dangerous spots. So listen, I like to think that this is an aberration more than it is reality for them. I just don't know that the reality is much better than this. I do believe it's better. I don't know how much better. And I think if we're all honest, there was a lot of there was a big financial gain from the Andy Nahar move, and there was a few players that are no longer with the team that were making big money. And when you lose guys like that, you've got to replace them somehow. And I think and I hope that that's coming. But it needs to, because the roster as it is currently constructed, you're not really giving Ben Olsen a chance. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, he can fire the guys up, but what are you really asking him to do? waiter can only bring you what the chef cooks, and the chef can only cook what the vegetables that the
That's a nice analogy.
The buyer buys.
It's great analogy.
I think there's limitations there.
And those are the two last points that I wanted to touch on. First, the elephant in the room, which is, I think, at least it's my feeling and the perception that I'm getting from DC United fans, is the waning confidence in this new ownership group with the quote-unquote big money who's going to deliver the stadium. Well, you know what? That hasn't happened. The reinforcements haven't happened. So then you start thinking to yourself, what are these guys doing behind the scenes? Which is the elephant in the room that nobody really is talking about nationally. But then the other question is, and it goes back to what you just said about Ben Olsen, to me, other than his love affair with Pahoy, what can you put on Ben Olsen for the start of this season? Is it tactics? Because to me, I just don't see a lot of talent on this team. And if your two high-priced center backs, which you've dumped in a significant amount of your salary cap, are going to play the way they played, that's not a coaching issue. That's a player issue.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do? Like, are you going to throw this team out in a 4-3-3 and be like, attack? Well, if you don't have the personnel to do that, you're just opening yourself up for a shellacking. And I'll tell you, we did the pregame show from RFK for our broadcast down here on May 8th, and we looked at their starting 11, and we talked about it. And as we were in the break, Glenn Davis, who's been calling these games forever, Eddie Robinson, who's an MLS vet, we looked at each other and we said, you know what? That's the best. We had kind of looked at their options before, and we said, wow, that's probably the best that Ben Olsen can do. We said that's if and we all kind of came to the consensus, hey, that's what we would all have all done. That's the best that you could do. And the three of us never agree on anything. So it's pretty clear to me, Ben against the Dynamo threw out the 11 that were his best option. And look at how that game turned out.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a bounce. Soccer's soccer. It was 2-0. Maybe if that goal goes in, that Kofi Sarkodie saves or doesn't save off the line, maybe it's 2-1 and the game shifts. You never know it. But if your best lineup can go down 4-0 at home, I don't think, and maybe I'm partial, and maybe there's some still my relationship with Ben, but I just cannot imagine anybody else doing better. I can't see a situation where this lineup, maybe spare a few points here and there, gets you any more than what they've gotten through the first third of the season.
And I think the important thing about what you just said is not the statement, it's the tone of the statement. It's not, whoa, they just rolled out their best lineup. It was, that is the best they can do. Where it's like, okay, that is the best he can do, and that's not really that great. In fact, it's not even really that good.
No, and people want to hammer Pahoy, and that's fair. There's some real limitations there. There's some things he does really well, and when there's other players around him that are doing it and helping him do it, you can maybe get some of the benefits of a Leonard Pahoy without the finishing issues. But again, he's not there. He wasn't in the lineup, and you're saying, all right, well, for all the things that DC United fans kind of wanted to see, this is what you wanted to see was that lineup. Granted, you didn't have Chris and Nick healthy yet, but that's the best you could do, and it really wasn't it wasn't competitive on that night.
What a great Capital Soccer Show reunion we just had.
Right?
Sebastian Salazar, thank you, man. We really appreciate it, and we'll definitely be checking in with you throughout the season.
Absolutely, man. Anytime. Love to do it. Great to be back on with you, and love the work you're doing with Pitch Pass.
Pitch Pass.
This is your voice. This is my red, white, and blue. This is my anthem to you.
For more show information, go to pitchpass.com.